Live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break. Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and headlines from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, we're talking about proposed legislation inside the state capitol on willful defiance.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
One o'clock on a Wednesday, we welcome you to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, along with ACSA's executive director, Dr. Edgar Zazwata. I'm Naj Alikhan, ACSA's senior director of marketing and communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you with us today. Go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello. Let us know where you are watching from today, or if you're vacationing. We definitely want to know where you're vacationing. Edgar, how are you today?
Good. We haven't done this in a while, have we?
Yeah.
It's been a second since we've been in here in the chair. So I know it's the midst of a lot of summer activity. Hopefully for our members, like you said, hopefully they are taking some time. I know we always get some of those hardcore folks who still want to chime in when they're on vacation. I actually think they're actually just trying to show off when we're in the, where we're, if they're in some cool spot right now. But I'm glad to be able to do this here in the middle of summer.
I will say that I did that when we went to Hawaii and you and Michael Kelly were doing the show together. And I was like, oh, it's 1 Pacific. Let me just go ahead and chime in on the comment section. I think I also did that from the line at the Peter Pan line over at Disneyland.
And as you know, Naj, in a week or about a week, I'm really excited. I'm going to Australia for the Women's World Cup. I'm a big soccer guy, as you are too.
Yep.
So my kids going with a big group of the soccer families to go to Australia. I'm going to go on venture say I'm probably not going to chime in given the time difference. I think it's like 15 hours.
Yeah.
You shouldn't expect me.
Probably not. Hey, you know what? That's a great segue because you mentioned soccer. Edgar and I, both soccer coaches, as many of you know. Rare is it that he and I get to see each other at a tournament or a game. But for the second time since we've known each other, our daughters got to play against each other in a tournament this weekend. And if not for one goal that my team gave up in the first 15 minutes or so, we would have actually gotten a whole rematch with you guys. But it was unique to see you on the sideline with us. We wanted to give you the scoreboard. Now, that's an overall scoreboard.
I was going to take issue with that. Wait. We won. How is it 1-1?
Yeah,
I understand Naj's fuzzy math here. So now
look, I'm a words guy, not a math guy. But that is the overall record between your daughter's team and my daughter's team. It is 1-1. So we're going to have to break that tie. It's almost disappointing that we didn't get a chance to break that tie in the championship game.
Yeah. I'm sure there will be other opportunities. So we'll look forward to that. I was disappointed myself. So on to next.
on to the next time. Hey, let's tackle a couple of stories here before we get into our main topic. I want to make mention of a story that we found from KETY television in the Santa Barbara area. This on mental health. Educators and staff at schools in Santa Barbara County are going to be receiving additional training to support students who are experiencing a mental health breakdown. This is a great story. The Crisis Prevention Institute will now teach de-escalation techniques. I'm sure I mispronounced that, as well as a variety of behavioral strategies. This decision to increase the training comes following an incident in January where a student was suffering from a mental health breakdown and was ultimately moved to a hospital. Edgar, this is great to see a county office, to see these school districts decide to pour resources into those educators and staff who have the most one-on-one interaction with the students to support the social emotional wellness of their students, because in many cases there aren't necessarily the tools for educators to be able to work with these students. But here's a county, here are schools that are actually making the time and effort to do it.
Yeah, I'm biased, but these are my favorite type of stories because I know how many times we've come on here. You're telling us we're our 100+ shows. So often the headlines is around the same issue about the rise in terms of trauma that our students are feeling, in terms of what the headlines are saying, whether our healthy student surveys are saying, just all the different data is about the problem. I think obviously this article also talks about the challenges that our youth are feeling, but it's also highlighting some best practices about addressing that. So one, kudos to the folks doing the work, and then also just for the folks, for the universe to just elevate these type of stories about some of the proactive efforts that can be taken to try to mitigate at least some of the issues that we're seeing.
Yeah, and just so you know, our team behind the scenes just tried to give me a pronunciation on that de-escalation because I completely screwed up that one. Let me also make mention of math framework. I know it's the most exciting piece of news we're going to give here at the top. We told you a few shows back that the state board was looking for feedback on the revision of the math framework. EdSource reporting that the state board is ready to approve that framework, and they'll do it as early as tonight. This framework's taken about 4 years in the making. This is the third version. There is a final hearing scheduled for tonight. And if you want to read more about those changes, you can do that over at our at EdSource. They've got a complete breakdown of it. And for all of you that may have been able to put in some comments, this is your last opportunity tonight, as we do have that hearing. Want to say hello to a couple of our members today. Elizabeth Bartholomew is with us, Ellen Wheeler, Mark Campbell with us, your former superintendent, Grant Bennett, who's with us, Jared Hungerford with us. So good to have you guys. I know that you're not on vacation, but you are here with us. I want to switch over to our topic now, Edgar, which is willful defiance. There's legislation that's moving through the state capitol that would eliminate suspensions for willful defiance in all grades. Now, the ACSA board took action. Tell us how we've gotten to this point where we're talking about this subject matter, what's happening in the capitol, and how the ACSA board moved through this.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue there's been few issues, both with the first iteration of this bill, which made the initial steps of prohibiting the use of suspension or expulsion for willful defiance from K to 6. And I know there was a sunset there in the middle school grades. And now the extension of trying to extend that to across the K-12 system. I think it's very fair to say that we've received a lot of feedback, a lot of commentary around these issues over not just this year, over the course of the years. When I was working in government relations, we saw, and one of the things we were very proactive, and this is what I love about ACSA, of our system, we have a very diverse state. We have not only in terms of the type of schools, in terms of demographics, and not all schools are created equal, right? And I think we got a lot of that rich feedback. And initially, some years back, the ACSA decided to support that bill. And I would say it's fair to say it didn't have universal consensus there amongst our members, right? And I think so fast forward to where we're at now of seeing, and I think we're going to talk about some of the progress, I think, and I think Ryan, our guest, is going to talk about what this has looked like in action. So our board was presented with another one of these questions now is, okay, seeing what we know, seeing the data since the enactment of the first prohibition, does it make sense to extend that? And we got a lot of feedback again, as you can imagine. And here's the bottom line. Our board felt that while, yes, there's some legitimate issues and some legitimate obstacles that we have to overcome in terms of capacity, resources, us at ACSA have a particular role here in terms of building that capacity as well, in conjunction with working with the state, that if we're going to say, if the bottom line is that this organization is about what's in the best interest of students, our board felt, and I would say went as far as saying almost unanimously, that this is an intent, this is legislation that we should support. So the board did go ahead and do that, while also acknowledging we need to do better, we need to do more as an organization, and also pushing the state to deal with some of the legitimate issues in terms of capacity, in terms of educator shortage, knowing that just saying you can't suspend, expel students is the whole solution, right? Especially when you could still pull them out of classrooms, that there's more work we need to do, but that the intent is very clear that the board wanted to go in this direction.
Yeah, and we've put something in the chat section, a link over to the text and committee analysis on SB 274. That's the Skinner bill on willful defiance. So let's go ahead and bring in our guest. Ryan Johnson is the principal at Enterprise High School in the Shasta Union High School District, one of our great ACSA members here. Ryan, it's an honor to have you on the show for the very first time. Welcome. Let me ask about, since your arrival over at Enterprise High School, we know you've made a concerted effort to lower the suspension rates and have been very successful in getting them to a number that's below 3%. So congratulations. Can you give us details on how you've been able to do this and what programs and what tools do you have in place?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to talk to everybody who's watching right now. And I will correct myself on the data. We got it to 3.1. So below 3 was not quite accurate. So I had to double check that and correct that. But 3.1 was big from where we started, I think. And it was a huge improvement. And that was pre-COVID, of course, but now we're trying to work our way back down. But yeah, I think it was a multifaceted approach in many ways, as many things are. I think it's first started with conversations in the school year 17-18. So that's how long we've been at it. It's been a long time. But just dialogue, many conversations with staff, starting with the rationale of why moving down this new road, this trend, obviously in the state of California, of finding other ways to mitigate student misbehavior, to work with students at a deeper level on behavior issues, and those kinds of things beyond just the traditional discipline approaches was paramount. So we started with those conversations with staff. That same year, simultaneously, we put together a restorative justice program. It started very small. So I want to tell that to everybody and really emphasize that it has grown each year, but we started very small. And I think that we started with about 8 kids. I personally took control of the program, created it, and I ran it because I felt a lot of my other staff at the time were too busy, including the assistant principals. So we started with about 8 kids, 8 students who would comprise a couple of panels who would help administration deal with discipline issues in a proactive way. A lot of times we would in all cases seek parent permission. And so our students operate in panels. I'm always in the room as the adult, but I rarely interfere. I've only had maybe 1 or 2 times where I've had to interject in a panel based on, if it's going south or going wrong, something was off or the kids didn't want to participate. So it's been pretty successful in that way. But now we're up to 6 panels. We're up to close to 30 students participating as panel members. So I train them each year. At the beginning of the year, we train them in conflict resolution. We train them in restorative justice. At our first year, we went to an outside organization to help us do that. But since then, we've kind of taken on that burden ourselves at the site level. So we do the training. I do the training with the assistant principals and some other staff every year. And then we do debriefs throughout the year, of course, too. But the experience is really what the students start to get, and they start to become just very, very good at it. And they deal with cases anywhere from small issues, vandalism, fights, substance abuse, big suspendable offenses that we used to suspend 5 days for back in the day, right?
Right.
But now we're sometimes we'll do half and half. We'll do some in-house suspension with a restorative justice. But a lot of times we'll forego suspension altogether, and I think that's led to the lower rates. Yeah.
Ryan, first of all, thank you for joining us here. You alluded to this. We started off talking about legislation. I know we've had districts that have changed the rules, and you could have rules, right? You could have prohibitions. You could have all this. I think you'd be the first to admit that you aren't really going to be successful in some of the work you've engaged in unless you really change hearts and minds, right? I know one of the things that you've talked to us about is that you've obviously been successful in changing that campus culture. And it goes without saying, I'm sure that didn't happen overnight. So maybe walk us through that process, those early days when, you're going to go and move and make a change. What do you think was instrumental in terms of just changing the trajectory and the direction of the culture?
Sure. And like I said, it's in many ways painstaking, right? Slow process, a lot of conversations. You have people all over the board in terms of how they feel about, kind of this new trend, new direction. You have a lot of folks that are in line with it. A lot of people that may not buy into it all the way because they haven't seen it. And so I think one of the things that was key was that we try to be very transparent with the process. I talked about it a lot at staff meetings, at the district level, at board meetings. But with our staff, we talked about it pretty much ad nauseum. They probably tell you that themselves. And it was good. They were good conversations. But we've also, for instance, I invite people in to see panels. I think that, to be transparent that way, you want to see how this process works. Come see it. If you have a prep period and we're happen to be doing one, I'll let you know. Just let me know your interest and we'll fit you in and try to get you into one and see one in action. Right. And then to take their feedback as well about what they thought about it and how effective it was. And I think that being transparent like that and that two-way communication is absolutely vital. I mean, in leadership period, it is vital, as we all know. But with a process like that, where you're trying to implement a new program, to really get voices from everybody, because, and I'm very open with them. I don't know if I'm doing it right either. So we want input. We want a lot of other sets of eyes on it, looking at the process. And then just growing it year to year.
I want to remind you folks, pardon me, if you have any questions for Ryan, go ahead and put those into the chat, and we'll address some of those a little bit later on in the show. Ryan, we hear all the time about the importance of community buy-in, and also achieving this is easier said than done. I think that there are plenty of examples of that. What approaches have you taken with your students and staff that address some of these restorative justice efforts?
Yeah, I think in terms of getting community buy-in, you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think. A lot of our community are our parents too, and I think that's been a crucial piece with them too, is involving that component. We operate the restorative justice program on a voluntary basis, so we don't force it, and so we get parent buy-in, we get parent permission, because a lot of these panels, right, they see everything. They get video evidence, they'll get everything that we get. So there's a permission aspect to that we seek out. But parents are obviously on board, because the last thing a parent wants is their student suspended, of course, or expelled or anything like that. So I think they do appreciate this. We've tried to communicate out to them what this process looks like, what is really at the heart of the matter, which is we're trying to work with your kids as people, and your students as people. We're not just here to do things to them and get them out of our hair, but rather, because they're going to be back, if we suspend them, they're going to be back in 5 days max anyway. We need to work with them as people, and really as a mentor role. And we've really had to do a lot of, I think, explaining in terms of that philosophy to parents, to community, like, what is this for? What does this mean? People hear the term restorative justice, but I don't necessarily think they know the details behind what exactly that philosophy is, maybe. And so that messaging is crucial. And we've tried to do a lot of that, that, hey, this is why we're doing what we're doing. This is what happens in there. Getting back to parents and everybody affected in an incident as well about how it went, is crucial as well, with keeping confidentiality, of course, as well. But I think that just that messaging has been crucial about exactly what this is and what it means. Mm-hmm. It just means we're working with your kids more closely, more effectively, I think, with more effective strategies. And as we say, our motto kind of became, if you consecrate, you must educate. And I think that the educate part has been a little lacking in a lot of traditional discipline in the past. And I think that trend's changing, which is positive.
Yeah.
Hey, Ryan, you mentioned yourself that, that there are folks who may not know about this work. I mean, we know there's a lot of veterans, and obviously there's a whole community of folks who are really invested in this. But for some, as we may be coming across this, that they hear the terms, they hear panels, they hear restorative justice, but don't really have that clear picture. I think one of those pieces that you alluded to earlier is the student role, which I think is one of very different approaches to discipline. So maybe walk us through that. What exactly is the student role? What does that look like in practice when you're having one of these cases?
Yeah, so I think the students are crucial. I mean, they're the whole essence of the project. And working with them has been a great honor. I'm glad that I initially didn't hand this off to somebody else on my staff, and I've had the last 6 years to do this with these students, because they're phenomenal at it. And I think as adults, sometimes we don't necessarily have faith at the outset that, hey, these kids are going to be able to mitigate some of these issues and And this year we had an example of a student conflict, probably involving about a dozen students, and it was very serious. It involved some serious threats. But our kids managed the whole entire thing. It took about it was a 3-hour panel. That's how long. They don't typically last that long, but this was a very involved one. So the kids get trained. I recruit them from our ASB class, our student government class. They're some of our leaders on campus. They're not all from there, but the reason we do that is so we can utilize ASB time as class for them to do panels, and so they don't miss a lot of other academic classes, which is important. And I train them. We train them kind of throughout the year as we debrief as well, but that's kind of a continual thing. We do about 2 or 3 cases a week, I would say, probably 2 on average. Mm-hmm. So they're pretty busy. And that's why we've kind of expanded the number of kids we use to, again, lessen the impact of anything that they might be missing in other classes or other experiences. And the panels are convened. We take all our referrals from the assistant principals. So it takes some work with them too about, hey, what are the appropriate cases for restorative justice? What does it look like? They will refer. We will put together the panel. We brief the panel. The panel gets all the information. If they get video evidence or anything like that, they have a chance to talk about it, formulate their own questions. We give them a lot of tools up front, scripts, questions, those types of things in the training. Students come in. We conduct a panel, which are typically anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. There's outcomes. Outcomes can be anywhere from personal apologies. We've had panels take students down to apologize to other students in person to facilitate those. We've had other counseling that has come out of it. There's a variety of things, but the big thing is, I think our students have to know, who are doing the panels, who are conducting them, have to know this is an interactive process. It's not about blame. It's about solution. It's a solution-oriented process. They have to be very trained in that, and that they're trying to interact with these other students. They're not doing something to students, for instance, giving them a disposition or detention, much like a peer court would. It's a different philosophy where they're interacting with the students to come up with a solution collectively. That's a big part of it.
If you have questions, again, go ahead and put those into the chat. Ryan, I do want to ask a question that's come from Humboldt County.
Sure.
They ask, what restorative justice programs are you using? What are you doing? What you're doing is very different from IIRP. So I'm very interested to know what training you are using. So what can you tell that superintendent?
We utilized our first year, as I said, we went kind of external. We got some help to come in. That was through Hope City Reading. It's actually in our community. And they came in and provided some resources. Our county office as well does a lot of work in this, and there's some experts at our county office level that have come in and help us. But from there, we took bits and pieces of a lot of stuff from everyone that's doing everything around the state, which I'm sure some of these folks are some of those folks that I've stolen things from. And we've kind of pieced it together. So we're not using a particular program in and of itself. It's more bits and pieces of things that we've tried to put together collectively on our own from bits and pieces of other work folks are doing that we think is really good and valid. You can share my email. I have no problem. I've shared a lot of my resources out with multiple districts. I will do so with anybody here today. If they want to email and request anything, I can send them the tools that we use. So I have no problem doing that.
Ryan, you talked a little bit about obviously the big picture. Just kind of sum it up from all of this work, all this effort, from start to finish. What would you say are the most positive changes you've seen as a result of the implementation of these programs?
Sure. Yeah, I think student voice is huge. I think the inclusion of students who misbehave with other students on our campus, including the adults on campus, all together collectively trying to come up with solutions to help students who are misbehaving. It's a collective team effort. Our school is pretty well known for its very family, community tight-knit culture. This has just helped continue that. And I think that it creates that kind of culture where it's, you see something going wrong, and now we have teachers, we have students actually requesting the use of the restorative justice program, which I think to get to that level, which is last year, it took 2 years, 6, of course. That's a pretty big development when it gets well known across campus that there's alternate ways to really solve conflict before they get too big. There's resources there, and to have everyone be of the understanding that we're not blaming anybody. No one's in trouble. This is a team-oriented problem. It's going to be a team-oriented solution. And I think that it's led to that kind of culture.
We got a question in from ACSA Vice President Daryl Camp, who's the superintendent over at San Leandro Unified School District. He asks, do you educate parents and families on this restorative justice approach for students? If so, how do you do that?
Yeah, it has not been widespread, and that is one of our future goals, as well as getting it more restorative justice practices in the classrooms at the classroom level. That is also a huge goal of ours. But we haven't done a bang up job of letting all parents know about this restorative justice program. Obviously, the parents that are involved with their students that are involved are aware of it. We've talked a lot about them, about the program, but we need to get a comprehensive approach of communicating out what this program is and why we're using it, and the rationale behind it, and how it can be used to help all of our students.
Ryan, Steve Hubby asked a good question here. How do students handle the confidential information after the meeting and when they're back on campus? And how are the students handling their relationships when they're back together?
Sure. It's a great question. The confidentiality is huge. We focus huge on it. It's a very strong emphasis with our panels. I keep the number of students involved in the restorative justice program smaller than I probably would like because of that reason. We have panels that are fairly small when they operate, so there's less of a likelihood of that, but they sign confidentiality agreements. We spend a lot of time on the confidentiality piece of it. And that's why the recruitment of students that are involved is also, it's a pretty specific process. We recruit very specific students for it because that is a huge concern. And so far, we've been very successful at it. We haven't had a lot of recidivism in terms of similar problems with the students that have gone through the program. Last year, about 100 students went through in total in terms of being in front of panels. So it's 100 out of, we have about 1,150 students. So it's not a ton, but this year was smaller than a couple of years ago. But that's another reason. So yeah, that is a big concern in terms of confidentiality. That's why we seek parent permission. We spend a lot of time on confidentiality though as well.
Now, we made a little bit of the discussion earlier in the show about people responding while they're on vacation to this show. What folks you don't know is that Ryan is currently, like within minutes or hours or days away from the third child arriving in the Johnson family. So Ryan, just so we can set it up, how close is your wife to where you are in case she has to pull you off of this show?
Just in the other room. As a matter of fact, you can see her right there. She's sitting in the couch in the other room. Now she's laughing because I'm talking about her. So she's that close. So yeah,
she's that close. Good. All right, Ryan Johnson.
Glad we made it through the half hour here. That would have been great.
Seriously, Ryan, thanks so much for being with us today. Ryan Johnson, principal over at Enterprise High School in the Shasta Union High School District. Ryan, good luck to you and the growing family.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And again, share my email. I can share anything out with anybody if they want anything.
Certainly will. Thank you so much for that. Let me make two corrections, only because I like to make sure that all of our viewers know when I mess up. I did make mention of Southern Humboldt Joint Unified School District that was asking that question. I believe that was Stephanie Stefano Davis, the superintendent over there in Southern Humboldt Joint Unified School District. And then I can't believe I messed this one up, Edgar. I said San Leandro Unified School District for our guy Daryl Camp. It's San Lorenzo. Am I correct? It's San Lorenzo.
He's only our vice president.
I know.
Of ACSA. I think he's scared that he messed up one of the bosses there. That he may have made a mistake. But I think Daryl might give you a pass. Dr. Camp's a forgiving person there.
He'll give me one pass.
Maybe one
on that. Yeah, I'll make sure to stay on his good side, folks. ACSA's Leadership Summit coming your way in November. Here in Sacramento. It's going to be a great conference. Here's a preview. Yes, that's right. ACSA Leadership Summit coming your way November 2nd through the 4th here in Sacramento. You can get more information and register for Leadership Summit, axa.org/professional-learning. And folks, if you like what you've seen on our show here, subscribe to us on YouTube. You can get instant alerts when we're about to come on with breaking news. And then, of course, previews of our regularly scheduled Wednesday live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Also, we like to amplify the great stories that are happening in your school communities. If you've got a story to tell, go ahead and send the information along with any pictures or talking points to our great EdCal editor, Michelle Carl. You can reach her, mcarl@axa.org. Edgar, we are not going to be on the air next week. You and I are going to be traveling. Just to kind of sum up what Ryan was talking about, clearly some good tools and resources. He invited any of our viewers, if you want more information, to contact him. But with everything that he said, with what's happening in the state capitol with this proposed legislation, there's a lot happening on this topic, a lot of moving parts.
Well, I think what Ryan shared with us is a perfect example. That's not just about creating the rules, right? Like you could create prohibitions, you could create, guidelines, and sometimes that really needs to be the catalyst. But it really, the heart of this is what do you then do with these kids, right? It's not like discipline issues are going to go away for our leaders, for our teachers, but it's what is the system going to do to respond to those needs. And I think what Ryan and many other schools around our state are demonstrating, that there is an alternative path, one that is student-centered and frankly probably has better outcomes than the historical approach that sometimes our system, not just here in California, but throughout, how we had historically approached this.
Yeah. All right, folks, thank you so much for joining us here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the week, and we'll see you next time.